The Letter, by John Doe. Chapter 1, The Invitation. The envelope arrived in the mail, completely unexpected. It was made of old-fashioned parchment paper and sealed with a wax stamp that bore a strange symbol. The recipient, a man named Tom, recognized the symbol immediately. It was the same symbol that his late grandfather had used as his family crest. Tom's grandfather had always been a mysterious figure in his life, and Tom had always been fascinated by him. His grandfather had lived in a sprawling mansion in the countryside, surrounded by secrets and stories that had always intrigued Tom. When Tom's grandfather had passed away, the mansion had been sold off to a private buyer, and Tom had never had a chance to explore the secrets it held. So when the invitation arrived, Tom saw it as an opportunity to finally unravel the mysteries of his grandfather's past. He couldn't resist the allure of the masquerade ball at Ravenwood Manor, even though he knew it could be dangerous. Days turned into weeks, and Tom couldn't stop thinking about the invitation. Eventually, his curiosity got the better of him, and he decided to attend the masquerade ball at Ravenwood Manor, hoping to uncover the secrets of his grandfather's past and the symbol on the invitation. Little did he know, this decision would lead him down a dark and twisted path, one that he would never be able to escape from. Chapter 2, The Arrival. Tom arrived at Ravenwood Manor just as the clock struck midnight on the night of the full moon. The manor was located in a secluded area surrounded by dense forest, and it gave off an eerie feeling that made Tom's skin crawl. As he approached the entrance, he noticed that the other guests were all wearing elaborate masks that concealed their identities. He felt out of place, dressed in his simple suit and tie. Tom made his way inside, and the first thing he noticed was the smell. It was a strange mix of musty old books and decaying wood, and it made his stomach turn. The ballroom was dimly lit by flickering candles, casting eerie shadows on the walls. The guests were all engaged in lively conversation, but Tom couldn't hear what they were saying over the eerie music that filled the room. As he made his way through the crowd, Tom couldn't help but feel like he was being watched. The eyes behind the mask seemed to follow him wherever he went, and he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Just as he was about to leave, a tall, dark figure appeared in front of him. It was a man wearing a mask that was a grotesque caricature of a human face. Tom couldn't see the man's eyes, but he could feel their piercing gaze. "Welcome to Ravenwood Manor," the man said in a deep, menacing voice. "I trust you're enjoying yourself?" Tom tried to nod, but his throat felt dry, and his words caught in his throat. The man gave him a sinister smile before disappearing back into the crowd. Tom was starting to regret his decision to come to Ravenwood Manor, but it was too late to turn back now. Something had drawn him here, and he had to see it through to the end. Chapter 3, The Mysterious Host. Tom mingled with the other guests, trying to find any clues about his grandfather's past or the symbol on the invitation. The music was haunting, and the atmosphere was tense. Everyone was hiding behind elaborate masks, and Tom couldn't help but feel like they were hiding something. As he made his way through the crowd, Tom felt a hand on his shoulder. He turned around to see the tall, dark figure who had greeted him earlier. The man's mask was unsettling, and Tom felt a chill run down his spine. "May I have a word with you, sir?" the man asked. Tom nodded hesitantly, and the man led him to a quiet corner of the ballroom. "I couldn't help but notice your interest in the symbol on the invitation," the man said. "Do you know its significance?" Tom shook his head, feeling a little uneasy. "No, I don't. That's why I came here tonight." The man leaned in closer, his eyes glinting behind his mask. "You should be careful, my dear sir. Not all secrets are meant to be uncovered." With that, the man disappeared into the crowd, leaving Tom feeling even more confused and anxious. As the night wore on, Tom noticed that the guests were starting to act strange. They were whispering to each other in hushed tones, casting furtive glances around the room. Tom couldn't help but feel like something sinister was brewing. Just as he was about to leave, the lights went out, plunging the ballroom into darkness. Tom could hear the guests screaming and running for the doors, but he was frozen in place, unable to move. Suddenly, a spotlight appeared, illuminating the stage at the far end of the ballroom. A figure emerged from the shadows, dressed in a flowing black cloak and wearing a mask that resembled a bird of prey. "Welcome, my dear guests," the figure said, its voice echoing through the room. "I am your host, the Raven. And tonight, I have a game for you all to play." Chapter 4: The Raven's Game. Tom stood frozen, staring at the cloaked figure who called himself the Raven. The other guests had fled the room, leaving him alone with the Raven and the other masked figures who had emerged from the shadows. "What kind of game?" Tom asked, trying to keep his voice steady. The Raven laughed, a chilling sound that echoed through the ballroom. "A game of survival, my dear Tom. You see, you and the others who have been invited tonight are all here for a reason. You all have secrets that you would rather keep hidden. And I am here to expose them." Tom felt his stomach drop. He had suspected that something was off about this masquerade ball, but he had never imagined that it would turn into a deadly game. "What do you want from me?" Tom asked, feeling a surge of panic rising in his chest. The Raven turned to him, and Tom could see the glint of madness in his eyes. "I want you to survive, Tom. But in order to do so, you must play my game. You must find the clues that I have hidden throughout the manor, and use them to uncover the secrets of the other guests. And if you fail to do so, well, let's just say that the consequences will be dire." Tom swallowed hard, trying to think of a way out of this nightmare. But the Raven was already beckoning the other guests back into the ballroom, and Tom knew that he had no choice but to play along. As the game began, Tom searched the manor for clues, trying to uncover the secrets of the other guests. But with each new piece of information he uncovered, he realized that the Raven's game was much more sinister than he had ever imagined. And the more he learned, the more he realized that the only way to survive was to find a way to escape Ravenwood Manor alive. Chapter 5: The Hidden Clues. Tom frantically searched the manor, trying to find the clues that the Raven had hidden. He knew that he couldn't trust anyone, not even the other guests. The Raven's game had turned them against each other, and Tom felt like he was in a nightmare that he couldn't escape. As he searched the manor, Tom found a hidden room behind a bookshelf. Inside, he found a letter that revealed a shocking secret about one of the other guests. But as he was about to leave, he heard footsteps approaching. Tom ducked behind a tapestry and held his breath as a figure entered the room. It was one of the other guests, wearing a mask that resembled a lion. Tom watched in horror as the lion-masked guest searched the room, looking for something. He seemed to be searching for the same letter that Tom had just found. Tom realized that the Raven's game had turned the other guests into ruthless competitors. They were willing to do whatever it took to survive, even if it meant betraying each other. As the lion-masked guest left the room, Tom knew that he had to be more careful. He couldn't let his guard down, not even for a moment. As he continued to search the manor, Tom found more clues that revealed the dark secrets of the other guests. He realized that the Raven's game was more than just a twisted form of entertainment. It was a way for the Raven to manipulate and control them, using their secrets as weapons against each other. Tom knew that he had to find a way to stop the Raven, to put an end to his deadly game. But as he searched the manor for a way out, he realized that the only way to escape was to uncover the Raven's own secrets. And he knew that it would be his greatest challenge yet. Chapter 6: The Mysterious Figure. As John was looking through the rooms, he heard a strange noise coming from the end of the hallway. He cautiously approached the end of the hallway, trying not to make any noise. As he peered around the corner, he saw a shadowy figure moving in the distance. John's heart raced as he tried to make sense of what he was seeing. The figure seemed to be wearing a long, dark cloak that draped down to the ground. Its movements were slow and deliberate, almost as if it were searching for something. John hesitated for a moment, unsure of what to do. He didn't want to confront the figure, but he also couldn't just ignore it. He decided to follow the figure from a safe distance, hoping to get a better look at what it was doing. As he trailed the figure, John began to notice something strange. Every room the figure entered, it seemed to be searching for something. It would move slowly around the room, looking under furniture and behind curtains. After a few minutes, it would leave the room, seemingly unsatisfied with its search. John's curiosity got the better of him, and he decided to confront the figure. He stepped out from behind a corner and called out to it. The figure stopped in its tracks and turned to face John. For a moment, the two of them stood there in silence. John couldn't see the figure's face, but he could sense that it was staring directly at him. Then, without warning, the figure began to move toward him. John panicked and turned to run, but the figure was too fast. It closed the distance between them in a matter of seconds, and before John could react, it was standing right in front of him. The figure reached up and slowly pulled back its hood, revealing a face that John had never seen before. It was pale and gaunt, with deep, dark eyes that seemed to pierce through him. John felt a chill run down his spine as he stared into those eyes. He tried to speak, but his voice caught in his throat. The figure spoke first, its voice low and raspy. "You should not be here," it said. "This place is not for the living." With that, the figure turned and vanished into the darkness. John stood there, alone and bewildered, wondering what he had just witnessed. Chapter 7. As he turned to leave the room, Tom felt a strange sensation in the pit of his stomach. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, but he couldn't quite put his finger on what it was. He continued down the hallway, checking each room as he went. They were all empty, just like the previous ones. But as he approached the end of the hallway, he noticed that the door to the last room was slightly ajar. Tom hesitated for a moment, but his curiosity got the best of him. He pushed the door open and stepped inside. The room was dark, and he couldn't see much at first. But as his eyes adjusted to the dim light, he could make out the shape of a person sitting in the corner. "Hello," he called out tentatively. The figure didn't move or respond. Tom took a step closer, and that's when he saw the glint of a knife in the person's hand. He froze, unsure of what to do next. Suddenly, the person stood up and lunged towards him. Tom's instincts kicked in, and he quickly sidestepped out of the way. He turned and ran out of the room, slamming the door shut behind him. Heart racing, Tom leaned against the wall, trying to catch his breath. He couldn't believe what had just happened. He had to get out of this place before something even worse happened. Chapter 8. OM's mind was racing as he stood there, trying to calm himself down. He couldn't believe that someone was in that room, let alone that they had a knife. He knew that he had to find a way out of this place, and fast. But with each step he took, he felt like he was getting more lost. The hallways all looked the same, and he couldn't remember which way he had come from. He decided to retrace his steps, hoping that he would recognize something along the way. But as he turned a corner, he saw something that made his heart sink. The hallway ahead of him was blocked off by debris. It looked like a section of the ceiling had collapsed, and now there was no way through. Tom felt a wave of panic wash over him. He was trapped. He looked around frantically, trying to think of another way out. But all he could see were the same bland, gray walls that surrounded him. He was just about to give up hope when he heard something that made him freeze. It was the sound of footsteps, coming from down the hallway. Tom knew that he had to hide, but there was nowhere to go. He pressed himself up against the wall, hoping that whoever was coming wouldn't see him. As the footsteps grew closer, Tom held his breath. But then he realized that they weren't footsteps at all. They were the sound of something being dragged along the ground. He peeked around the corner, and that's when he saw it. It was a body, being dragged by someone in a black cloak. Tom couldn't believe what he was seeing. This place was starting to feel more like a horror movie than anything else. He knew that he had to get out of there before he ended up like that poor soul. But how was he going to do it? Chapter 9. Tom stood frozen, watching as the cloaked figure dragged the body down the hallway and out of sight. He didn't know what to do next, but he knew he couldn't stay there. He turned and ran in the opposite direction, hoping to find another way out. But as he ran, he heard more sounds coming from the other end of the hallway. It sounded like someone was pounding on a door, trying to break it down. Tom slowed down and cautiously approached the door. As he got closer, he could hear a muffled voice on the other side. "Help! Someone help me!" Tom recognized it as voice of a woman. He tried the handle, but the door was locked. "Stand back," he yelled, and then he kicked the door with all his strength. After a few tries, the lock finally gave way, and the door swung open. The woman was on the other side, looking frightened and relieved at the same time. "Thank God you're here," she said. "I don't know what's going on in this place." "Neither do I," Tom said, offering her his hand. "But we need to get out of here." "I'm Emma," she said as she stuck out her hand. "Tom," he replied, shaking her hand. They ran down the hallway together, looking for an exit. But every door they tried was locked, and the hallway seemed to go on forever. As they turned a corner, they saw a bright light up ahead. They ran towards it, hoping that it was a way out. As they got closer, they realized that it was a window. Tom pushed it open, and they climbed out onto the roof. They were on the 3rd floor, but they didn't have time to think about that now. They ran across the roof, looking for a way down. As they ran across the roof, Tom and Sarah searched frantically for a way down. But there was no obvious escape route. "We have to jump," Sarah said, pointing to a pile of hay on the ground below. "It's our only chance." Tom hesitated, looking down at the ground. The pile of hay seemed so far away, and he wasn't sure if it would be enough to break their fall. But they didn't have any other options. They took a deep breath and ran to the edge of the roof. "Ready?" Sarah asked. Tom nodded, feeling a mix of fear and adrenaline coursing through his body. They jumped. Tom and Sarah landed safely on the pile of hay, their bodies jolting with the impact. They lay there for a moment, catching their breath and checking for any injuries. Once they were sure that they were both okay, they got up and dusted themselves off. Tom looked around, trying to get his bearings. "Where are we?" Sarah asked, her voice shaking slightly. "I don't know," Tom replied. "But we need to get out of here." Tom then realized they were out front, near his car. "I apologize for the confusion, I must have misspoken. Let me correct that part of the story." Tom and Emma made a run for the car, the sound of the approaching mob echoing behind them. They could see their vehicle in the distance, but it seemed so far away. As they sprinted towards it, Tom fumbled in his pocket for the keys. He could feel the eyes of the mob on them, feel their hot breath on his neck. Finally, he reached the car and hit the button to unlock it. He jumped into the driver's seat and frantically turned the key in the ignition. The engine roared to life, and he revved it even louder as he slammed his foot on the gas pedal. The car shot forward, narrowly avoiding a group of people who had been closing in on them. But as they started to drive away, a man appeared out of nowhere and ran towards the car, pounding on the windows. Tom panicked and swerved to avoid him, but the man wouldn't let up. He was trying to break through the windshield with a metal rod. Without thinking, Tom hit the accelerator and ran the man over, his body tumbling over the hood of the car. Emma screamed, but Tom didn't look back. He knew they had to get out of there, and fast. As they sped away into the night, Tom's mind raced with thoughts of what they had just experienced. His mind and body still reeled from trauma as he drove. The thoughts of the strange man, pondering his sinister game. But as Tom drove, he realized that whatever secrets his grandfather and the Raven had, are better left in the past.